Welcome, fellow seekers of challenge and triumph, to the SufferSooner podcast. Join us on a journey where ordinary souls embark on extraordinary endeavors. From the relentless grind of gravel to the punishing gauntlet that is triathlon, we've tasted our fair share of suffering. So fellow endurance warriors, let's lace up our shoes, strap on our goggles, and dive headfirst into the challenge, knowing that with every step, stroke, and pedal forward, we grow stronger together. What's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 49. So today we're talking about base, build, specialty, mostly just the build. And then I figure, because it's time.
It's time
gravel,
to get bored.
Spring gravel is here, man.
Yeah.
I tell you, after those 2 last weeks of 2024 and just being down on myself for not being able to train in November, December, I'm back.
Yeah.
I took a hard, long look in the mirror.
Did you?
Yeah. And so.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were just talking before we got on the air here. So your November, I think you probably have a total number of hours for the whole month of November of like
an hour.
Yeah. No, that's what happens when you get sick. It's like, what are you going to do? You know? And this is why, in previous episodes, we've talked about it quite a bit. Like, you just can't get too wrapped around the axle on this stuff. If you get sick, you get sick. And when you are healthy again and you take the time to get healthy again, guess what? This stuff will come back pretty quick. And like last week, we were just talking, last week you were at, 12 hours last week, something like that. And you're going to be like 15 or so this week. So
yeah. So I was at almost 10 2 weeks ago. And then I had 5 last week. And then I'm already at 6 and we're, midweek through. So
just don't
there's
panic.
Don't panic. It's not the time to panic. So, we talk about, building the base and all that stuff. There's different guidelines, like people do it like, a 4 week or 3 week cycle, 1 week off, just like every other thing. I'm a big fan of, there's really not a need. If you're doing the base right, you kind of really don't need to take time off. Like, the time off will come as stuff gets scheduled. You have a doctor's appointment. You don't really need, you're going to miss that 4-hour bike ride on this weekend because it's somebody's birthday or you have some other function. So that stuff just kind of happens, but I don't know about you, but I don't really schedule like recovery weeks or anything like that. Cause I work on just keeping it so easy that I can basically recover almost every single day.
Yeah. That's been one of my issues with, we talk about Trainer. We both use Trainer Road. We've used it for several years now. And it's been one of my issues with it is I'll be in a base block on Trainer Road and every ride is pretty easy. You might get the occasional sweet spot or tempo ride, but almost every one of them is a super easy ride. And then they want to give you that quote recovery week on the 3rd week or the 4th week.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And I'm like, what am I recovering from? I'm not putting any effort into these rides. Like I started looking real hard at what's the amount of training stress, so that TSS score, what's the amount of training stress that I can put on my body in a given day and still feel like I can complete the workout the next day and not feel like the effects of the day before.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a lot of charts out there and people that dig into this a lot deeper than I did. But usually, I mean, when my fitness score, according to all that stuff, is in, early season or mid-season form, I can usually absorb anywhere from 80 to 100 TSS and come back the next day and feel pretty fresh. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but generally I can feel pretty fresh. It's not until you get into, I've done multiple, like yesterday I did multiple workouts. I think my total TSS was like 120. And today I'm like, I kind of feel a little bit. I mean, I don't feel crippled, but I do feel a little bit of the residual fatigue. But guess what? I'm still going to do my 2 workouts today, So I just think that the idea that you need a recovery week during a strict base block, when you're truly doing base and you're truly doing those low intensity efforts, it just feels like you're just basically giving yourself an excuse for a week. That's just my opinion. I'm probably wrong. I don't know. It just feels like you're, making an excuse.
I just find that myself, like when you're in the base phase, like I really kind of look at it as, I have this amount of time to fill. Let's say I've looked at my schedule and all the things that I have to do in my life. I have, let's say, 20 hours to train,
Yeah.
give or take, right? And let's say right now I'm training 5. Well, my base is going to be to fill up the volume of that time, right? To get as close to 20 hours training. One, to see if it's feasible, if I can actually recover from that. And then 2, if, I'm keeping it so easy that that I should be able to recover from that.
You and Bernie on Zwift are really becoming
Dude, me and him are best friends. We sit around and just talk all day.
Talk all day long.
Yeah. I mean, awesome. I mean, it's 1.5 watts per kilo. I am putting out 100 watts.
Yeah.
Which I'm not going to sound like an a-hole here, but like I'm a big dude. So I can put out some big watts because I'm a big guy.
Sure.
Like, so if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I wish I could put out 100 watts. Like, you don't wish that you weighed almost, 240 pounds. So, so if you wish that, then, we can swap places.
Yeah. When Travis puts out 100 watts, he's going like a mile per hour. Like you could walk.
Yeah. I'm not going anywhere. Yeah. I'm going downhill. That's the resistance.
How does it feel when you and Bernie are hanging out and you see the people running next to you, like running on?
Oh yeah,
they just go right on by you.
They just go. They flying past. I'm like, oh.
That's why I like to run the hills in Zwift, because then you just pass
on the cyclists. That's hilarious, man. I'm just like, and I'll do it too. I'll see the cyclists. I'll be like, you ain't or the runners. I'll be like, you're not passing me. You're not passing me. I'm gonna bury myself here.
Of course, the difference is their trainer is putting them on like an 8% grade, and my treadmill is still 0%. But they don't know any different.
They don't know any different. But like I was saying, it's like this is almost 200 watts less than what my FTP is. So it's like it's really easy. I'm sitting there,
I mean, it's borderline active recovery.
Right? Yeah, it's basically active recovery. I'm just putting in the time to figure out, like, I'm doing something more than just sitting on the couch dreaming about how many hours I can do. So that's how I feel about bases. Like you gotta figure out how many hours you're capable of doing, and that's your base right there. You can add in some special workouts, like you can do, like see what your threshold is. You can do some anaerobic stuff if you want to, but the whole idea is that you're able to just do little tastes of it so that you can recover. And then that gives you on, once you've reached the maximum time or when you feel like it, like that's when you start to transition to the build phase. And this is the main topic of what we're talking about. Today is the build. Like, how do you build for your race?
Yeah. And I think there's so much that goes on. We talk to a lot of folks in the area that, and you got your own athletes too, that base is not an intensity level. I mean, it can be, right?
Right. It's not a zone. It's not a training zone. Oh, I'm in my base zone. I'm just riding around in my base zone.
Right. And I think too, a lot of people listen, they hear base phase, build phase, but like we've done episodes on this before, so you can go back and listen. But like base phase, like, a traditional base would be a full like 12-week cycle of very low,
like 12 to 16 weeks of you just doing that. It's just like,
and it's like you can do that, right? And I think there's and we've talked about how there is massive benefit to those long, slow rides, especially in race season, to just build out, to establish the base or reestablish or stretch out the base. But we're talking about right now, like you said, I think for purposes of, as we're looking ahead to the spring gravel season, base is really about like, okay, it's time to wake the body up a little bit. Whatever cross training you've been doing, you can still do that, but you're going to start stretching out the volume and really establishing, okay, now here's the volume I'm going to work with. Now let's start building on top of that. And then that's
and getting the intensity at at that level.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, because ideally you haven't been just sitting on the couch for the last 3 months. Because if you have zero, like you're starting from zero, right? You basically don't have an aerobic base. So you probably do need to go through a good 8 to 10 week true base building phase where you're reestablishing your aerobic base, but not.
Yeah. Cause you're coming off of, when I calculate the base, it's usually like I take about 6 weeks prior to whatever you were doing. So if it's all zeros, well, we're starting
Yeah.
from zero. But
Yeah.
like if you're starting from like me and Danny, like we finished the year like, 10 something hours a week or 15 hours a week. So, that's that's a good starting point. We'll cut it down, get the average of that. And then, like I said, we'll start 5 hours this last week. We'll do, 8, 10, 15. We're basically getting up to our operating hours in the next couple of weeks to get that base going. And then when we transition into the build, it's like, okay, now stuff has to start looking, start approaching what would the race would be. So like if what you think is going to be a 6-hour race, well, that long ride or run or whatever it is on the weekend is going to have to approach that race time frame or distance. So
Yeah, and a good example.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to ride a 200-mile race with doing 60 miles a week.
No, ain't gonna happen. We've got some early season races coming up. Whether it be Flint Hills Gravel or Open Range or any of those. You're looking at it could be, and again because of the weather conditions, it could be anywhere from a 7-hour day to a 13-hour day out there on the bike, and I mean you ain't getting that done on 2 hours of training, or
No.
even a 2-hour Sunday ride for your long ride. That's not gonna be enough. So as we kinda talk about the build, like, I think for this week, I think I have a 4-hour long ride scheduled. Now, whether I actually do 4 hours, I might actually, maneuver that to being like a 3 to 3.5 and change the intensities a little bit so I get the same stress, but eventually, those are gonna have to turn into, 4, 6, 8, maybe 10-hour, rides, and
Yeah. And
that's
the
what.
thing is too, is like you don't have to do these, long rides, cuz eventually like what Danny's talking about is getting that fitness deeper into the length of it, right? So like
Right.
if like me and you could go and hammer out 2 hours right now. Like we've
Oh,
done
sure.
it. It's not
Yeah.
a big deal, right?
Yeah.
But if you told us to go do 6 hours, it's like we could go do 6 hours, but there'd be a lot of crying coming from me.
Yeah. So if I had to go do a 6-hour ride right now, yes, it would get done. And even if it's a relatively low intensity, it would get done, but I'm not gonna be real happy about it, and I'm probably gonna be hurting the next day and maybe the day after that, and I'm probably gonna need to take a couple of days off to feel like I've actually recovered, and that's just not a good place to be in, if
Yeah,
you're.
and it's not like it's the leg fitness, right? We're using biking as an example. It would just be all the other supporting muscles because
Mhm.
I haven't had to hold myself up on a bike for 7 hours since we did Big Sugar, which is back in October. So
Yeah.
all those muscles in my back and shoulder and neck are just be like couch time, baby. We're done.
So
Like it was over.
you bring up a really good point though. I mean, we're talking a lot about gravel right now, but I mean, if you've been riding the trainer for any amount of time, like, and then you go out and try to ride 6 hours of gravel, like we've talked about this too, like gravel just beats the crap out of you.
Yep.
And so you do have to at some point get some time out in the elements and get the feel of it. Because that will wear you down, just as fast as the
Oh
effort
yeah.
itself. So
The first couple gravel rides are just, I usually try to make them like relatively short, like
Mhm.
as far as the amount of gravel, just because it just beats you up so
Yeah.
much. And then you're extending the time on gravel further and further. And eventually like you get to a point of where the time on the gravel just, you're just out there, like
Mhm.
it doesn't beat you up as much anymore, and so
Right.
you can survive. You don't need to do, if you're planning on doing a 17-hour race, you don't need to be out there for 17 hours. So you could be out there for 8 and just kind of know how everything's going to be,
Right.
you know
Right.
so
Yeah, so now, you transition into the build and you've got your time blocks figured out, you've got your workout regimen, you're sort of back into the groove. So what does the build actually look like for people? How do they sort of, maneuver that phase of the training program?
yeah, so the build just really looks like, your you so let's take let's take me, for example. I wanted to run this half marathon. It's an hour and 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So that requires me to run 7-minute miles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the build would start out with me doing, let's say, a half mile at 7, whatever I felt I could hold on to that 7-minute mile pace
Yeah.
for. And so let's say I could hold on to it for a mile, right?
Okay.
So then my build would start out with a mile and then maybe, 1 or 2 repeats of that mile. And then as we start going through the build through, 8, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, however long your build is going to, it's approaching the goal of running almost a full marathon at that pace. So there would be basically, if you got to run 13.1 miles, by the end of the build, I should be able to run at least, 8 miles at 7-minute mile pace,
Yeah.
some fraction of, what. So basically on race day, I can, dig deep, recover, as I come into tapering, and I can recover and go in and run that half marathon at 7-minute mile pace at, and I can come really close to accomplishing my goal.
Yeah.
That's how what your build looks like. It's going to look like eventually it's going to start looking like you're building up towards your race distance.
Yeah, you're sort of
at your race intensity. That's what the build is. You're building towards that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's both increasing the volume and the intensity of the work, and the whole goal is to put that stress on your body during this training program, or this time in the program, so your body builds those adaptations and gets you ready for what is going to become, probably the hardest effort you put out. And we're talking about that in the context of running this half marathon coming up, but it's the same thing for bike. I mean, right now on the bike side, we're still very much in that base building phase, if you will, to block out.
We're building a huge base. Me and Bernie gonna be,
That's right.
Amazing.
But then as the half marathon wraps up here, we got about 4 weeks, I think, about this time in February. Once that wraps up, like the intensity that was being put towards run will now shift to intensity to the bike. And so, one of the things we've talked about is, again, Trainer Road, love the app, love the structure of the workouts. I don't have many bad things to say about it, and many other programs out there. Almost every one of these automated programs is geared around, you're just a one sport athlete that does, bike, or you do run. And if you do triathlon, that's fine, but
it assumes a lot of times it assumes you're going to do a 12-week base, 6-week build, and a 4-week specialty with a 2-week taper, and then you're going to race, and then you're going to start that whole cycle all over again.
Right.
So if you look at, that's I don't know how many weeks that I just made, but let's say that's almost 30 weeks. You're going to do one race a year.
Right. Right.
And so it's I get that if you're going to do one Ironman a year, that's fine. That's pretty much people I know that do Ironman. I know they do this exactly. They do this religiously. They take 2 weeks to a month off of their Ironman, and then they're back at it, building the base, and they're doing their base fitness. And they're going and they're stepping through, and then they have that next race. And it's not like saying that you can't race. It's just that your A priority race is that Ironman, and you can do 70.3 or a sprint or whatever local stuff that you want to do. But guess what? If your training plan and your coach or your whatever wants you to do, an 8-mile run, and you go and do a sprint that has only a 3K, well, guess you're running after the sprint while everybody else is getting beers. So it's you have to get that kind of stuff in. If you're going to race one time a year or whatever.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the challenges I have with, again, we talk about the importance of, hiring coach and having people around you that kind of bounce some ideas off of, because if you're doing multiple disciplines, or you're doing these events and you try to stack them up the way we do, the cookie cutter programs and even the AI adapted programs and all that, they don't really have a factor or a way to consider, oh, you're doing a half marathon now, and then you're going to go do a gravel event in 10 weeks, and then you're going to do
it would basically ask you to pick one.
Right. And the reality is almost as if the fitness built off of a run has like no carryover to the bike, when I can tell you firsthand, and I got to think there's studies out there that show this, that run fitness, and I mean, I've seen it firsthand with other people I know, like people that are strong runners can typically just jump on a bike and just go ride endlessly. And I'm just like, you really suck, because I got to put all this work in on the bike to get to where I am. And it feels like you can just run, like take off your running shoes and put on a set of bike shoes and you're good to go.
And then just tear it up. Yeah. It's just like,
come on. But yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, to think that the fitness doesn't carry over or help in any way and not really factor that in, to me, that feels like you end up leaving a lot of gains on the table, and you end up, really just kind of, lack of a better word, spinning your wheels, because when we get done with this half marathon, we're going to pick right up into the true build phase of the bike, and we're going to be ready to race in 8 weeks after that.
yeah,
So.
I know. I mean, I've kept swimming on, and swimming is great for VO2 max.
Mhm.
It's a really great VO2 max workout. And so like, that's where I'm training that, level of my
Get the
fitness.
oxygen
I'm
machine.
not doing it on my bike because
Yeah.
I don't need to right now. I can
Right.
save that for later and just do it in the pool, and it doesn't take as much out of me and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can train these different energy systems while you're still building a base. There's like, again, base is not a zone. It's just a phase.
Right. Right.
It's just like you're just trying to get the hours in, trying to build up the hours. And then when you get to the build, that's when you start getting more specific. Like you start cutting, you start whittling. If I'm if I'm building towards gravel, I'm not going to be building my swim mileage.
Right.
Or yardage. I'm not going to be building my run mileage. I just
Right.
do maintain it. Maybe I run 2-3 times a week,
Right.
and maybe I swim twice a week or whatever. And just everything else falls off, and we're not putting in crazy workouts because the focus now is that bike portion, and
Right.
that's what we're focusing on. But yeah, but like you were saying, like the freaking AI generated stuff has no idea what you're doing or how it goes to, between sports. It just does not do any of that, which is huge disservice to people. So
it does factor in the potential fatigue off of those events. So like if you do, like I've watched on Trainer Road, like I go do a run, and it did this to me the other day. I did my 7 miles with the Yassos in there, and immediately after, when Trainer Road imported that, it tried to adapt my 30-minute. It was just going to be a 30-minute endurance ride anyway, because that's just where the block is right now. And it was trying to adapt it down to like a almost below active recovery type effort. And it was just like, I get it, like the fatigue has built up, but it has no concept for the fact that I've kind of already been doing this. And so it's trying to make adaptations to my bike plan around my running fatigue. And again, while I think that stuff's going in the right direction, it's not something that I'm going to sit there and go, oh my gosh, I have to do exactly what Trainer Road says.
Well, there's that thing with like primary sport too. Like
Exactly.
You're a lot better biker, and I'm a lot better biker than I am. We're better bikers than running, right? So like some people get done with a hard bike and they're like, oh, I'm gonna go run and shake out the legs. I'm like, I would never think of doing that ever. Like it's like I get done with a hard run and I'm like, if I can get on the bike, my legs are gonna feel so much better.
Yeah.
But it's another thing too, like, the thing is like if you and me go and swim for 20 minutes, who's going to be more tired?
Oh, I'll definitely be more tired.
Like
sure.
I'll just, but it's like the primary sport for, like the AI just doesn't come into effect of what people's primary sport is or what they're kind of good at. It just assumes that we're all sucky at everything and that we need more rest. And I just don't think that's the case. And that's kind of like, I know we're fighting against AI a bunch here, and AI is not here to defend itself or whatever. But
again, I think it's going in the right direction. I think it's really interesting to see. It just, it goes back to a comment I made on an episode last week or a couple of weeks ago, where I just feel like everybody wants to be so data driven that they want to be told by the data they see or an algorithm they want to be told by a bot what to do next, and as if like there's no variability for the fact that you're a organic human being with your own capabilities and ability to adapt. And if you just push yourself a little bit harder and know when to say enough is enough so you don't get injured, but you might actually be able to accomplish more than whatever the AI program that's based on hundreds of thousands of other
The
users.
bell
Sure.
curve.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like if so this kind of goes back to the reason like who who wins, okay, just generically speaking, who wins the race? Is it the person that follows the training plan that's right in the middle of that bell curve you talked about? Or is it the person that takes that training plan and finds a way to go a little bit more to the extreme end to get that extra benefit that nobody else has? And again,
It's
whether
that, and then the wherewithal to know what you're weak at, right? So
yes,
if
yes,
like, I mean, me and you have talked about this countless times about how your sprint is not very good. And so you're like, I want to add some anaerobic work
right.
in the build to build my sprint up. And I said,
And
and
just
I
to
was like,
generate more
yeah,
power
and
is
generate more
also good.
power,
Right.
and just getting that neuromuscular connection, because you have to. It's a skill. You have
It
to learn
is.
it.
Yeah.
Sprinting's not like, yeah, some Cavendish and those guys, elite levels are
Mhm.
born with it.
Right.
But here, like in the Midwest and the people that we race with, it's a skill.
Sure.
You can learn it. So if you feel like you're like, you know what, I need to learn
Mhm.
how to sprint better.
Right.
One, that's going to make you a better cyclist,
Sure.
and it makes your whole, you focus on what you're not good at,
Mhm.
and you're outside of the bell curve, because in no plan or anything like trainer road or any of these other plans are going to go like, you know what, for your
Here's
100
the
mile
secret sauce.
race you need to be a really good sprinter.
Right. Yeah, it's not needed. But
No,
here's
it's
but
not.
here
It's not a. And it may be needed, because at
right.
the end of a race, if you have the fitness to hang on to the group, well, guess what? You have to
Yes.
sprint the group at
So
the end.
so
So
here's
learning that skill, yeah, is
yes,
going to be
exactly.
huge.
Exactly. And here's just on that note, like here's what I learned because remember later in the year last year, I had made that comment to you like, hey, I think I'm gonna put a little more effort onto like just quick bursts and power generation.
Yeah,
And all of a sudden I was, setting, for myself 5, 10-second, 30-second, power records for myself. And then next thing I know, I go out and I catch onto a group ride and I'm able to like, actually use it and put people behind me. And, I know it's a group ride, but like there's always people that want to sprint. Well, a guy took off and I had no problem chasing him down. I never would have been able to do that 6 months before. And so, but then what I found out was I was doing that just for fun. But then, as I kind of kept doing more and more of that, guess what happened? All of a sudden, my 1 minute repeatable power, I started noticing I could hold on a little longer and repeat those, higher, mid 300-watt efforts that I couldn't do earlier in the year. And
right.
so,
You found a
found,
weakness
yeah, I found a
in
weakness.
your training, and you're just
Right,
like, all
right.
right.
There's one thing about I talk about the data and how people get kind of wrapped up in it and want to be told what to do. Garmin put that feature on their bike computers and on the watches about like what type of cyclist are you, like cycling ability or whatever it is. I think mine has always said endurance specialist. Whatever the hell that's supposed to mean, it's an endurance specialist. I'm like, so what are you like an anaerobic specialist? Are you a sprint specialist? Is that what it is? So maybe. And I got to think about that. I'm like, well, if I'm okay, maybe it's right. I'm an anaerobic specialist. That's probably true. I mean, endurance is pretty much all I train. I'm like, but if that's true, like then aren't you kind of missing out on the advantages of some of that higher end training that it can bring? And doesn't like by taxing that system and being able to recruit those muscles. And now if you can recruit them and use them in a short period, can you recruit them and use them over a longer period too? That would bring up your functional threshold power. You got to build out
Which
the
is
endurance under
exactly
it.
what we do in a
Exactly.
base, right? You take
Exactly,
your
right?
1 minute power and you're like, well, how much of that can I hold for 2 minutes? How much
Yes.
can I hold for 5 minutes? How much
Right,
can I hold for, for 10, 15,
right,
20 minutes? Well,
right.
if you start improving that 1 minute power, well, then everything kind of gets dragged up along. So, like,
Yeah.
if you've ever experienced a plateau in your FTP, like, it's probably because there's only so much FTP work you can do. There's only
Yes,
hours of powers that you can ride. Now you
that's
have to
right.
do some other kind of stimulus, whether it be, sprinting or, big,
And
anaerobic or aerobic efforts. Either one of those, you have to find what you're not good at
mhm.
and start working at it.
You
And
said a
that'll help
keyword.
pull it all out.
You said a keyword there when you find like a plateau in your fitness. So I know we're talking a lot about, you know, racing and trying to, climb the standings and that kind of stuff. But this goes for anybody out there that
If
just
you
wants
just
to,
want to do a minute faster
or
on
yeah, like
your 5 mile park run or
exactly,
whatever,
or if you've
whatever
got,
it is, the,
know,
the people at your local group run, you just want to hang out with
the fast kids.
the fast kids or
Yeah.
the group that's in front of you, right?
Yep.
Like you're tired of either being stuck in, what you feel is a little too bit of easy group, but
Hmm.
you also don't want to be running by yourself. You want to be with the next group,
Right.
or
Right.
whatever. Like that's what we're talking about. You can't just keep showing up every weekend running the same and hope
Right.
that you're
Expect
going
you're gonna get
to
better.
get
Yeah.
better, because you're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, and I think so. You bring up a good point about the plateau of the your fitness, or because one of the things I've noticed is for all the training that's been put in for the last couple years, my trend is still the same. Like I always start the season out with an FTP, based on a ramp test or something that's kind of where I was the end of the year before, but then it like 2 years ago, it went up a little, a decent little chunk, I think 10 or 15%. Last year, it only went up like 5%. And so I'm kind of hovering, my FTP is kind of hovering in this sort of, band over the last couple of years. And I'm like, I got to like, there feels like there's got to be a way to kind of break through that. And whether that's, strength training or just, putting on more muscle or I look at a lot of these cyclists, like, most cyclists aren't exactly bodybuilders. So, like, just stacking on muscle isn't the answer either. And so to me, it's like, I really think there's something about the variety and the intensity, which I don't think is a new revelation by any means, but I think it just goes to show where it's like, you know, you gotta really put your plan in check sometimes and be like, "Hey, what am I not doing that I need to be doing more of so I can get out of this little rut that I'm in right now?" And the build phase is a great time for that because you're trying to get your body to change and adapt at a faster rate. That's not what the base is for. I mean, the base, you can try to introduce some of those concepts, but the build is really where you're gonna get the magic, and that's what this phase is all about, is getting your body to get maximum change to support the type of event that you wanna do later in the year. So
Yeah, and it's just building that time in zones is what
mhm.
it is. It's like, if you look at your training history and you look at your the race coming up, and you're like, you know what, this race that we do every April, it comes down to a sprint. And
Mhm.
so I should work on my sprint. And so that I'm going to add that to my build, and I'm going to build my sprint so that if I somehow lucky enough to get in that group, I can at least have a chance to
Y
holding on to the sprint.
It's funny you
or
say
for
'cause
or
go
for
ahead.
me, if on most of my races, it's like I'm by myself and I'm trying to bridge a big gap at the end. That's,
Yeah.
it's like a mile and a half gap to the
Mhm.
next either group or person in front of me. And it's like, so
You
my training is always about putting on that, becoming steady through the race, and then being able to go
stronger.
almost up to
Yeah.
threshold for the
Yeah.
last
So
hour and a half of racing.
so it's funny because you never have a problem getting to the front of whatever group you're in.
No.
I mean, you never do because you're a diesel engine, you just crank, and when people recognize that, they're happy to fall in line behind you, so I know from experience.
Yeah.
But
So
it's funny because but you're right, like, if we're, and we're not gonna sit here and try to diagnose, like, what does Travis need to do next, but it's like
no,
but I think the reality
I
is,
know
like,
what I
if
need to
you're
do, and it's put the fork down.
yeah, right. That's all of us. But
Yeah.
but no, seriously, like, your next jump would be, "Hey, I need to figure out how to bridge the gap to the next." So, like, you building out an anaerobic sprint effort, while it might be beneficial on some level, is probably not really the focus of where your training is gonna go. It doesn't mean you won't do those things. It just
No.
means that, like, hey, I gotta figure out how to, like, sustain, I gotta be able to do a 5-minute, 8-minute VO2 max, legit VO2 max late in the race to drop these guys that are just dead weight back here and get up to the next group so I can make a move and hope that I can move to the front of that group by the end of the race. And like, I say that for you because then for me, like open range last year was a really good eye-opening experience. I got to the end of that race and I found out through multiple races last year, I can put in a strong, really strong VO2 max effort late in the race. At the end of Unbound, I was putting in, you look at my charts, we put in like a 15-minute threshold effort at the end of, because I thought I was going to beat the sun. And so I can put those efforts in late in the race. What I couldn't do was get enough separation on guys to win a 7-man bunch sprint. I could have jumped like 4 or 5 spaces on my age group if I just would have had the same sprint ability that I had late in the year. If I had that early in the year, I had a good chance I might have been able to hang on, at least beat a couple of them, not all of them. It could have beat a couple of them. So yeah. It's just, these are the things, like, this is the reflection you have. And then now you start to implement it into your training plan.
Yeah. And the base is the best time to pick, like, to just look at what, if you're doing the same races, you kind of know that what you've made mistakes on before, and the base should be the building of, you're basically like, okay, here's my race strategy for this race that we always do in April, and here we go. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to build myself up to be that kind of athlete here. Or if you're doing some kind of new race or something like that, you can look at it, talk to people. How does the race play out? What sections are hard, and then you start to build up what your build is going to look like according to what the race is going to be.
And now you're peeking ahead to a couple episodes in the future around race strategy and pacing strategy and all that good stuff. But yeah, whole other conversation for another day. So,
well, race strategy is hold on until you can't hold on anymore.
That's right. We did that at a couple of races last year, and we found out real quick, hey, that front group is the front group, and we're just going to hang out until this next group catches us, and we're going to let them pull us around a little bit. But good stuff. So yeah.
But like we were saying, when do you know that build is over, right? Like, it's when you're basically at a comfortable place of what your race is going to be, right? Like, so we'll go back to the running the half marathon, right? So right now I think we're doing some like 4 miles of tempo this weekend. So that would be 4 miles of race pace in our long run.
That's going to be so much fun.
That's, and then plus we already had another, week of, where we're doing, I think we almost did, like, out of the 7 miles, we did probably like 3 or 4 were above race pace. So that kind of stuff, so you look at that, you're like, wow, for the week, we're doing almost 8 miles at or above race pace. Well, we're getting close to doing the whole distance at or above the pace that we want to do it. So that means we're done building. Now we have to specifically make it a, race effort for that time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like you mentioned, Sunday is like that 9 miles, and 4 of it is going to be above race pace, and that's going to be brutal because it's 4 constant miles. It's not like it's broken up. And we did 2 weeks. Was it 2 weeks ago? We did 8 with 3 miles above race pace, and I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah, I almost threw up.
Yeah, so. I mean, I remember. I mean, you took off, and I was like, "Ooh, the bold strategy, Cotton."
Yeah. Well, I was telling you, my sinuses had just been running, and so they were like running into my throat as I'm like just open mouth breathing, and the snot's and the snot's just running down my face. Real picture of awesomeness.
Yeah.
And it's just, I like kind of like choked on it, and I was like gonna throw up in the bushes, and it's horrible. I was like, Danny, I'll catch up.
Yeah, because I was when we took off on that 3 mile stretch, you went up about, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds up the path on me, and then I kind of held it there, and so I kept you right in that range, 15 to 20 seconds. And I see you pull off to the side, and you're all hunched over, like, oh no, I got to get by him before he blows. And then I was like, should I have stopped? No, he would have said something, and I just kept on going. And and then next thing I know, you were right back in it. So I mean, I don't know. It's tough because I'm not a runner. I never have been a strong runner. I ran for sports, like to play, sports as a kid, but I didn't run to run. And
Yeah.
so this I would say this training block has been, I think it's probably been the most helpful for me to like develop as a runner. Like I think I have a deeper appreciation for like the technique of running. I think I've also focused a lot on the technique of running. Am I going to hit the goal that I started with early on? No, I'm probably not going to hit that goal, but I think I'm going to be a heck of a lot faster than I was the last
Yep.
time I ran a half marathon and for a race. And I'm pretty excited for it. It's I mean, still got a few weeks of training to go. Anything could happen, but um, for me, it's like if I can get anywhere between 145 and sub 2, I'm going to be happy, which I know is not anything to, scream about. It's not anything great, but it's for me personally, that's a step in the right direction. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
that's
good
a
for you.
pretty huge
That's all
step.
that
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then, maybe next year, maybe then I can go for an hour and a half, or maybe I'll stretch it out to a marathon. We'll see. So,
Yeah. I just saw to really make you feel humbled. I saw the half marathon record was broken like
no,
2 weeks ago. You want to guess how fast he ran it in?
58 minutes.
57.
Is that right? Okay, I just
Yeah.
guessed because I'm like, well, it's got to be about half of whatever my time would have been.
Yeah. So
That's how I
like
gauge. Yeah. Go
it
ahead.
was like a 13 or 14-minute 5K or something like that.
Hmm.
Or not 5K, it was 10K or something. It was ridiculous. Just
Yeah,
like I just looked at the splits and I was just like, but I mean, that's world class right there, right?
yeah. I
So
mean, it's impressive. It's super, super impressive. I would never even. I don't. I can't even imagine how much that hurts. Like I guess I
it
could.
all hurts the same. You just
I
go
was like,
faster.
yeah, right. I guess I could. Yeah, just go out and do like a hill sprint for like instead of 20 seconds, make it 2 minutes, and then
Yeah.
multiply that by 40. You kind of know what it feels like.
Right.
Um,
So
yeah, it's but no, I think you're right. I mean, as far as like how to tell when the build is over, it's like, well, you're number one, you're gonna be approaching your race, so you're probably gonna be about
yeah,
3 to
your
4
race
weeks out.
mileage at a race intensity.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's really when you kind of know the base is over is when you're
Build
getting
is over.
ready,
Yeah.
or I mean the build is over
Yeah.
is that you're approaching that race distance at
What
a
if you
race
what if you
intensity.
don't what if you don't so this is another thing, like, we didn't really start with this, but what about people that are going through these cycles, but they're not necessarily training for an event, right? Like we would typically say, here's the event, and I'm gonna back up my specialty, my build, and my base block sort of off of the date of the event.
Oh
But
yeah,
some
yeah.
but you know what I mean? But like some people are like, well, I don't really have an event in mind, but I need to progress through my training. So you still go through like a base build and then maybe back to a base, then a build. And I
Hmm.
think it's a really good point. It's like, well, the build is over whenever you're able to, stretch out those hard efforts to a certain point. And you still have to have a goal in mind, right? Like, hey, I want to complete a half marathon in this amount of time, or I want to complete a 100-mile race in this amount of time. So, but I think what's important too is like at a minimum, after about 8 weeks of whatever you have said is this is my build block, after about 8 weeks of that, it's time to do a fitness assessment, right? It's time to do another ramp test or another, 5 or 10K to get a sense of how your paces are, and then go back into a base phase and sort of build out that aerobic endurance at that new intensity level because
Yep.
your body has changed quite a bit. So, and I bring that up because I think a lot of people like you just kind of get lost in it's like, well, if I don't have an event, then what do I do? Do I just keep doing the same thing over and over? Like, well, you can, but you're probably not going to see the improvements. So
Yeah,
you
you
need to
can
make sure you're
keep
cycling.
doing the base for as long as you want, but
Sure.
the build you should definitely have like a goal in mind, right? Like
Mhm.
so you're like if you want to run say a minute per mile faster for a given 10K or for an
Mhm.
hour, whatever name insert goal here,
Right.
right? Like I want to ride instead of riding 13 miles an hour average, I want to ride 15 miles an hour average,
Mhm.
or instead of swimming, 213 per 100, I'm going to swim 205.
Right.
So it's all about just you have to pick a goal, right? You can't just go through the motions. I'm just going to run hard today and see what
Right.
happens. Like
Right.
if you're just kind of going through there, you're just kind of like not really you're doing stuff, but you're not really like targeted and focused, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what you want to do when you're in the build phase.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of lay that stuff out, and then you just start chipping away at it. And once you get to if your goal was to run a minute per mile faster for a 10K, you're once you get starting to approach that intensity, at or above that intensity, for the distance, during your weekly runs or whatever, your build phase is over. And it's time to go and, like you said, do that retest and see if you're a minute faster. And the thing is like sometimes the build doesn't work, like it works. It gives you fitness, right? And you can hold on to it for 3/4 of a mile, or you can hold on to it almost, that pace at, 3/4 of the effort. But, sometimes the build you just maybe tacked on, you bit off more than you could chew, and your body's not able to adapt. So
adaptation.
Again, that's a data point, right? Failing is a data point, or, I don't think of it as failure. It's just, you didn't have it on the day.
You didn't achieve what you wanted. Yeah.
You didn't achieve on the day. You can either retest, or you can just, move on like you achieved it, or not achieved it, but moved on. Like, you've put in some good work, and you're faster. You're just not,
well, I think
goal pace faster. And
I think it's
start to work on that.
I think it's just, to your point, I think it's just more about, hey, I've still learned, I've still adapted some. It's a really good opportunity, especially if you didn't achieve the goal, because I think you bring up a really good point. Like, what if I didn't achieve what I set out to? It could be
because if it was easy, everybody'd be achieving the goal. We'd all be running 57-minute half marathons. We'd all be winning Unbound together, crossing the line same time. Like, it would just be easy.
How many athletes have we seen over the years now that think that, like, there's this, like, it's a book and I just got to follow, like, it's a recipe and I just got to follow the directions of the recipe, and the cake is baked perfectly every time and it tastes immaculate. It's just this perfect cake all the time. Like, that's not how it works. It's like, I wish it did, because if it did, then we would take care of it.
You mean like this book or this book,
right?
Or this book. They all have the same training stuff in them.
Yeah. But
the thing is they're all a little bit different, and you may be just a little bit different for that kind of stuff.
Well, odds are you are. Like, that's the thing. Like, those books are written because the coaches have established a regimen that worked to turn somebody who's probably already just a very good athlete into a very elite athlete, and maybe even a world record holder. And that's great. Those are really good concepts we should all learn from, but it's not a cookbook. It's not a recipe. It doesn't guarantee results. It's just,
you can't follow the base build in here and then come out like Chris Froome. Right?
I wish you could.
You can't take Chris Froome's training and do it before he got to, or Tade, and you can't do what they did before they got into the world tour, and then, follow it verbatim and then somehow end up in the world tour. It may not work for you.
Well, and I think so the point of all that is, like, whether you met your goal or not, and all of that, it's a good opportunity to just kind of reflect on what did you learn and what were some of the shortcomings, because there might be very obvious things to point out, like, oh, I got sick and I couldn't complete some of the hardest workouts for 3 straight weeks. Well, no kidding. But then there may be,
or I went really hard in week 1 and I couldn't go as hard in week 2. Right, week 3 was kind of a week 2 makeup. And then, of course, I had recovery week. And so it's just like, oh, so basically you didn't follow the plan and you kind of overdid it.
Yeah,
so it's like,
exactly. And then there might be other more nuanced things, like, oh, you know what, like, to your point, like, maybe I did follow the plan, but man, by week 3, my body was just breaking down. Like, I couldn't hold on to the fatigue. I couldn't get recovered. Well, do I need to change things in my recovery regimen? Do I need to eat better so I'm more, have more nutrition to work with and my body can actually repair? And it's like, there are so many factors that go into this. It's not just go do the work and then all of a sudden results happen. I wish it was just go do the work. I mean, that's the starting point, but that's not the end all be all of success. And
yeah.
So It's just really important to keep it all in perspective because things are going to come up. You're not going to hit the goals you want to hit sometimes, and it's not time to
Yeah,
throw it
I'm not going to
all.
hit my running goal, and
Sure,
it's like
it's okay. It's going to be what
it's
it is.
okay. It's
Yeah.
going to be okay. It just, but I did find, like you were saying, like I did find this running, the type of running that we're doing, that we set out to do on this plan. I kind of like that a little bit more, and I
Mhm.
would like to see that continue after,
Yeah.
maybe do this same run build block after we get through Unbound,
Mhm.
and maybe apply it to a later, triathlon or something like that. Just
Yeah.
something a little bit better, like carry this build block for running, do it later in the year, see how
Mhm.
that goes, and then make my decision whether or not it's, if it was me just being sick and not able to
Yeah.
execute on the majority of the work, or if it was the wrong plan in general. So
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I think it's going to be really fun to see post race. What were the gaps in the plan itself versus my ability to just execute certain parts of it. Because I mean, I got sick as well for about a week and a half. I was down and out for a portion of the plan, and that's going to happen. But I'm with you. I really like and we'll talk about the plan in more detail in another episode. But it had more variety than I think the plans we've done before. And in my opinion, like whether I'm faster on race day, I know I'm a faster runner now than I ever have been at any point in my life because we were on that training run and I set a 5K PR on a training run. Like
yeah,
it was not an all out effort for a 5K. It was a tempo effort or above race pace effort for above half marathon race pace effort for 3 miles,
yeah,
not a 5K effort for a 5K. It was so in my mind, I'm like, man, if I could shave like another 8 to 10 seconds a mile off of that and set another PR, I bet I could. And now I'm sitting here going, shoot,
yeah,
maybe after this half marathon, maybe I go out and actually try to do a 5K PR.
yeah. Go out and do a little
Just
PR
go to the rail
5K.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
So
but it's good stuff. So all right, what's next?
good. Rapid fire. Do we have any
Rapid
rapid
fire. A
fire?
little bit of rapid fire. Let me see. Let me pull
Okay.
this up here. So as folks are familiar with now, all right, we like to have Chat GPT ask us a few questions. And this time I said, so what are some of the hard questions that we would ask gravel cyclists about the build phase of their training? Like what are some hard questions about it? So nothing too crazy in here, but there are some good ones I think that'll like we didn't maybe touch on in the episode itself. So maybe we can get some perspective from you. Um, First one is like from a progression standpoint, how do you determine whether you're increasing your training load at the right rate without risking overtraining or injury?
So, the rule of thumb is 20% increase for swimming and biking, 10% for run, and that's usually a little, I would say, on the conservative side. But again, without knowing you as an athlete, are you, like propensity to run, like if you're a runner and you have kind of running history of
Mhm.
injuries and stuff, the real true test is personal. It's basically how much are you able to fully recover from,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
that's totally individual. It depends on your diet, depends on how much sleep you're getting, quality sleep, how stressful your life job is, all that kind of stuff plays into your ability to recover. So you may be able to pile on the run stress if you have, you know if you're able to do it, like maybe closer to 15% per week,
sure.
or maybe you're somebody who's just life is full of stress, and it's, you're lucky if you make 8% a week
Yeah.
increase. But
So it's funny that this one popped up at the top of the list. I think it's a common question around like, well, what's the rate of increase that I should look at, whether it be through a base phase, build phase, whatever, whether it be an increase in time, duration, like, or if it's intensity, or if it's whatever the case may be. But we were talking before we started recording about a pro athlete that we both follow, and I made the comment that that athlete over like basically the month of December didn't really have anything logged on Strava, like not a lot of cycling activity going on. And then
yeah,
all of a sudden, like in the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
15 hours, 20 hours,
Yeah,
30-hour week.
yeah,
It's
you
just
see,
like you look
see
at
like
that, you're like, that's more than 20% right there.
you go from like 130 miles to 260 miles to over almost 400 miles. I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, like
or
good
something like
gracious.
that. Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody's a little different, but I think a lot of it depends on your background, as you pointed out, and then also like, especially if you're prone to injury, probably going to be a little more cautious.
Yeah, I always see the people that get injured, they always get injured usually in the build phase because they're
Yeah,
building too much too soon.
too fast.
They're
Mhm.
like, yeah, they're too fast. They're like, well, coach gave me 6 VO2 max efforts. I'm going to do 7. And then it's like, or they're like, or if you're self-coached, you're just like, I'm just going to go until I feel tired. And it's like, you're not supposed to go until you feel tired. You're supposed to
Mhm.
just go until like, if you're doing, we get to get into specifics, but like if you're going and doing VO2 max efforts, you're looking for about like 7 to 10% of your wattage decrease. That's
Yeah,
when you know it's over. It's over.
yeah,
After that, it's done.
yep,
There's nothing you can do. You could do 10 more efforts. It's not going to make those VO2 max efforts any
right,
better.
right,
So you're looking at like a certain amount of drop of your peak power and stuff
right,
like that. So like my thing is always, it's always just, are you able to recover from one hard workout to the next hard workout? If
right.
you're still feeling Monday's bike ride and Thursday's bike ride,
Mhm.
Monday's bike ride was way too
Way too
hard.
hard. Yeah. I think too, a lot of folks like and I mean, I'm guilty of this too. You forget that the fatigue builds up over time. So you mentioned earlier in the episode about, like, hey, if I did week one at say 10% over whatever the prescribed intensity was, that may come back to haunt me in week 3. And
Yep.
because that overload you put on your body, while you may not truly feel it a couple workouts later, your body's still trying to recover from it, and it can show up later to haunt you. So
Yeah, I always see athletes that have the biggest trouble in week 3 of
mhm,
like a 4 week, 3
rotation.
weeks. Yeah, 3 weeks on, 1 week off.
Mhm.
They're the ones that tend to push the last interval harder. They tend to run the last mile in faster than they
Yeah,
should. And they just tend to do like a little bit extra. And it's all that little extra ends up crushing them in week 3.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
if you just decided, you know what, instead of taking almost 2 weeks recovery, then how about I just do it a little easier?
right.
It's like that minimal effective dose. Like
Mhm.
if you're lifting weights, right? And I lift weights at the gym, and it's like if I do 8 reps and that gets me 90% of the way to, getting adding strength,
Mhm.
then why am I going to do 10 to 15 reps
Right.
of that same weight? The chance for
Mm.
injury is I'm going for that 98 to 95% or whatever, like
Yeah.
for that adaptation. Like
It's
why
risk
risk all
reward.
that
Mhm.
when I could just do 8? If I could do 8 and get 90% better,
Yeah.
do it all the time, you
Yeah,
know?
there's a certain risk reward to it for sure. And depending on where you're at in your training plan and calendar, it's like, yeah, I mean, there's no reason to push yourself to total failure, like muscular failure, and I think
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people think. Well, it wasn't a good workout if I didn't just go out and absolutely crush
Yeah, and
myself.
some people are like, "Well, these workouts are just a little too easy." So like, well, just let them be easy. That's fine. Just
To
let
a
it be
point.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
until I ask you to do the hard work. Then I want to see you go hard. But if you go the same speed the whole time, like the hard's not hard enough and the
Yeah.
easy's not easy enough. It's just
You know
like
what?
make those hard days hard.
A good way to break that out of people is, just gonna make this up. Like, let's
Back
just
to
say, like,
back to back days is what I do.
well,
That
that
really
too.
that curbs it real quick.
Real quick, yeah. But, I think a lot of it is, like, there's this perception of, well, if it's too easy, I'm not getting anything out of it. It's like, okay, that's fine. And it's supposed to hurt. Okay, that's fine. So and then I learned this kind of firsthand when we introduced more and more of those long, slow days, the true long, slow days. And it's like, okay, let's say 100 watts feels super easy to you as a cyclist, and you can do that for, an hour and you're done with it. You're like, all right, I don't even feel like I did any work. Go on. Okay, fine. How about now we're going to do it for 5 hours?
Yeah. Do that
And,
same 100 watts for 5 hours.
and let me tell you, and scale that to whatever your FTP is and all that. But the point is like when you have to do that easy effort for 5 hours, it ain't so easy anymore now, is it? Like
Yeah.
it's like that one movie. It's like, let's talk now.
Yeah, let's talk now. Yeah, it's like, I mean, how many times have we run, 10-minute miles? It's like, yeah, I can run a 10-minute mile on my easy day. But then it's
Sure.
like, well, let's do that for 3 hours. A 10-minute mile becomes insanely hard to hold on to.
Pain in the backside. So
Yeah. So everything starts slipping. So
Yeah.
if you just, if you're an athlete and you're listening to this, like you don't have to go hard
Right.
all the time. I think that's a huge misconception, is that you should be wiped, and you should be like, there are days that you should be wiped out. But if you think about it as, there's only so much effort you can give, right?
Mhm.
In this build phase. And if you're trying to give all of your effort at the very beginning, you pay for that. It's like a debit card.
Yeah.
You only have so much cash in the bank.
Right.
And so like, if you're trying to withdraw all your money on week 1, you're going to be bouncing checks on 2 and 3.
That's right.
But if you just do, you do a little withdraw and then put some money back, and a little withdraw and put some money back, and a little in this, by the time, there's no harm in going a little bit easier, a couple of the training cycle of your build, to make sure that week three go as hard as you want.
Right.
Because you got a rest week afterwards. That's what I do is I go hard enough during the first 2 weeks that I feel like I'm, I've always told you, you always see it too. I go, that seems about right. That feels about right. I do a lot of that. This feels about the effort it should be.
Yeah, right.
And so, it's just because I've been doing it for, I don't know, 20 years or so.
Sure.
Like,
absolutely.
I just get to a point where I'm like, yeah, this feels about 300 and something watts. And then I look down, it's 300 watts. It's like, whatever. Yeah. So I'm like, you just go off of, I'm like, yes, this is it. And then week 3 comes and I'm like, all right, let's see what we got. Cause next week I'm couch life in it.
All right. So moving on then. So specificity. So, ChatGPT is a lot of fun. Sometimes it can get a little direct. So here we go. During your build phase, do you really think your training matches the chaos of race day, or are you avoiding the hard stuff that matters?
That's good.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, it does. I think specificity, like your race phase, is what I call it. After the build phase, that should be the chaos. Like, what can happen at the race? Here's where I think attacks are going to happen. This is, I have to plan for this. Like, what happens if I get a flat tire? Like, where's the worst place to do this? Like, how am I going to do the aid stations? Like, that kind of stuff. That all happens. That chaotic, crazy mess of garbage that I just spewed out. That's what happens in the last 4 weeks of training.
The other thing, we talk about this a lot. Like, there's certainly especially this time of year before the race season kicks off, you don't have options to go out and do races. But we talk about this all the time. Like, if you want to get faster, race more. And here's why. You can do all the structured training in the world that you want. What you can't do is anticipate in that training when an attack is going to happen, and you're going to have to drop out that 3-minute VO2 max to hold on to a wheel long enough to break from the group. And then only to find out that group catches you because whoever did the breakaway can't hold
wasn't strong enough.
Yeah. Wasn't strong enough. But you followed it, and
you followed it, and you didn't know that they were slowing up because you weren't paying attention. You were just trying to hold on, and the next thing you know, you turn around and that whole group has just swallowed you up.
And then guess what? And then somebody counterattacks you, and now you're like, now what do I do? So, but I mean, that's the kind of stuff like that's why the build block is so important, because you want to have confidence. Like, hey, you know what? This guy's pushing 300 watts on an effort to try to break away from a group on a 100-mile ride, and it's early in the race. You know what? Go have fun. I'm just going to hang out in my pace, in my zone, and then I'm going to count on the fact.
We'll see you later, Travis.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, but I think it's just, and that's where we get into the actual tactics. But I think the point is like, you never can anticipate the timing of when you're going to have to dump those efforts, and then on top of that, like, this is why that whole 1 minute repeatable power and knowing what your 5-minute repeatable effort is, because it's so important to know that, because then like, hey, I can repeat this a dozen more times over the next hour and a half if I have to, because I've tested it out in my build block. So if this guy wants to keep doing this, I'll just keep doing it. Well, I
How
won't
many
feel
how
good
many
about it.
times did those guys attack me on the hills
Yeah.
only to just
Only
find out, oh yeah, I don't have hill climbing legs. I
right.
have
Yeah.
flat power
Flat,
legs.
flat and downhill. So when
Yep.
when the downhill comes and then you get into a flat and you start just cranking out a steady,
Yeah.
steady wattage, and they can't hold that steady wattage
Yeah.
anymore. And it's like, see you later, guys.
Yeah, I can't go. I can hold 400 watts for, for maybe a minute or so. 600 watts for like 30 seconds, but like I can hold really close to my FTP for
Yeah.
hours.
So in this
So
vein, yeah, exactly. So in this vein, because this is where I think in the build block you find out these things. So how do you expect to handle the suffering of race day if you can't even push through your hardest intervals? And so when the race gets ugly, are you going to have the grit to keep going, or are you just going to crack and coast along? And I think that's really important. Like that's part of the thing with the build phase. That these hard efforts
that's where you
teach
get the
this.
grit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like we get
Like
the grit. We don't get the grit from running, from doing these easy run times. We're doing above race pace, and that's where you get the grit. Like, oh
yeah.
my gosh, this hurts.
I can't hold on. I can't hold on.
So the hope is that on race day it feels just a little easier, and you're like,
Right.
well, this wasn't as bad as that one run, and
Right.
so that's where your grit comes in. That's
Exactly.
where it happens, and you have to just, again, you have to go through these hard days, but they can't be so hard that you just crush yourself, so that you can't train anymore.
Right.
Like it's just not worth it.
So we touched on this earlier a little bit on the nutrition side, but I think this is a good one here. So do you feel like an athlete or just shove whatever's convenient in your body after rides?
On the build, I will shove whatever corn dog, roller dog, whatever. Or if we're close to like a pizza shop, I'm getting pizza. Like the build block is just kind of like
You're the garbage truck, man. Just freaking dump it all in there. It's fine. Oh gosh, that is so good.
But yeah,
I've been better. I've been trying to be better about it, to be honest. Yeah.
It's a struggle.
It is. I'm not gonna lie. Like I'm not.
It'd probably benefit me more if I was more disciplined on the build phase, because on the specialty in the race phase, I'm super, like there's a recovery shake after every hard effort there, or a ride. I'm really particular about what I'm putting in, the night before and the morning before we have to do hard workouts. So like that stuff gets more structured. And if I just back that up another, 8 to 12 weeks, I would probably get a lot better.
So my off season, I've been trying to lose a few pounds, right? And I've kind of plateaued a little bit. I've lost a few pounds, but I need to lose more. I need to lose a lot more. But I've lost a few. And one of the things I've been trying to really focus on is especially after like the hard runs, when we've had the hard runs in this block. And now I'm starting to do 2-a-days where I'm getting a run and a ride in. One of the things I'm trying to do is after the run or the ride, both of them, like yesterday, I had a hard run and an easy ride. But after both of them, they were about, I don't know, 4 hours apart or so, I want to say. I had a protein shake after both of them. And so like things like that, where I'm like, hey, I'm really conscious of like upping my protein and not just shoving food in my face because I'm hungry. And so whether that actually helps me cut weight or not, I don't know. But what I'm banking on is that it will help in the recovery side, because I do have a tendency, like I will get really hungry and I'll just start shoveling food in, and it satisfies you in the moment. But then later on, you're like, oh gosh, I'm either still a little hungry, and then next thing you know, you're overeating, and now you're actually not, and you're not actually gaining, you're not actually losing weight like you want to, or even holding a steady weight. You start gaining weight and it just turns into a tough spot. So yeah, it's easy to let it get out of control quickly, but it's an important part of it. I mean, it's a discipline, just like the actual training itself. I wish I was better at it. Let's see here. What else has it got for us here? So, time management. Are you truly making training a priority, or do you just want people to think you're dedicated?
Yeah. So in the build time, that's when training, basically in the base phase, you can kind of slack off here and there. It's just like you're like the intensity is not there, but you're just kind of like, I kind of feel like it's just like I'm getting into my routine. I want to do, swim run this day and
Yeah.
bike swim this day and weights this day. And, that's when I use it because like my kids, their schedules change and stuff like that. So like, that's when I kind of use that to map out my base.
Yeah.
And then I start to adhere to a new schedule. And then like, I mean, you've seen it where one year for like 6 months, I would have a sprint try on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
It was the only time I could fit, that type of workout. And so it was a swim, bike, run. And it was all just kind of like an easy swim, hard bike, easy run. But that's just the way the structure fell. And so it was like I was doing a sprint triathlon like almost every week. And then now it's like I finally got it to where I can do like, 2 workouts a day every day, or 2 workouts a day with 1 rest day. Yeah. So, but that's, that's kind of how that goes. But yeah, when you start into the build phase, like when the build phase comes up, that's the build starts for me once hockey's done.
Right. Right.
So once we're done with hockey, it's all on. It's monk mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, one of the things we've talked about for my situation is I still have a desire to fit swimming in somewhere, but it's like, where am I going to fit it in? Like it just, where I fit it in, it'd be at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And it's just like, I'm not sure I'm that motivated. But I think that's really it. It's like if I get to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm doing a really good job of getting my run in, I'm getting my bike in, and then eventually that's going to flip, right? It's going to be focused on the bike. The run might actually suffer a little bit, but idea is try to at least have a couple of easy runs a week to just kind of maintain.
Yep.
And
then let it fall off right before, fall off completely before the big A race.
Yeah.
And then, because that's what it has to do.
Because I mean, the running, it just takes such a toll on your body.
Yeah.
Even if you're doing an easy run, it's still just all the banging. But a lot of ways that can help with the gravel side of it too, right? Just kind of helps with those stabilizer muscles and all that, your core. But one of the things I was thinking about is like, hey, a good way to get, and you mentioned it earlier, a good way to get some additional aerobic fitness in is to swim, because it's no impact and your body can recover from it in no time at all. I mean, typically
once you get good at it,
yeah,
once you get better at it. And the problem is like, and people, I joke around, but like Danny's smart enough to know that like he's not going to go and spend 90 minutes in the pool first time. Right. He's going to go, he's going to swim like 500 to 600 yards.
Right.
And then he's going to be like, that's good. And then he's going to hop out before he even feels tired. As soon as he feels his form break down, he's going to stop and just be done.
Yeah.
And that may happen in, 400 yards or 500 yards. Just whenever it happens, he's going to shut it down, because there's no use for him getting completely, going there for 90 minutes and just suffering.
Just slog myself out.
Yeah, slog yourself. It's like, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, yeah. So lifeguards are already on high alert when I'm in the pool, so I don't need to add stress to their life. So, all right. So let's just do one more here. So mental preparation, and so I think I think this fits more for the gravel side, especially the long form gravel events. So how do you mentally prepare for hours of riding alone if the race stretches it out, like it stretches out and you end up, sort of isolated out there, like the preparation for the fact that you might be the lone soldier out in the gravel road for, an hour or 2 hours at a time?
Oh, I've done whole races by myself.
Oh, that's right. You did do that. You did do that, didn't you?
Yeah, I've done an 8-hour ride by myself.
I seem to remember that last year you got separated and you fell to the back, if I remember right, and you were trying to catch us, and then you almost caught us. And
I've been by myself many a times. Open range, I've ridden the back half of that by myself many a times.
You know what I found hard about it though is because you're right. I mean, open range is a great example. Because I lost you last year in the field with the cow, like
with the cow patties,
yeah, all that stuff. But what's really hard to do is maintain a race intensity when you're by yourself, because like you feed off the group around you typically. Like it's easy. I shouldn't say it's easy to feed off of when you have a group around you, like, oh, I'm going to push a little harder because I need to hang in this group. But when you end up getting stuck out on your own,
it's easier because somebody else is marching out the tempo. When you're the guy that's always marching out the tempo, it's not hard. I just do what I do, and I just pay attention. And then so like, I just for me, riding like alone, it's basically going through the mental checklist, looking at my power, making sure it's right, making sure it feels right, and then eating, fueling, drinking, and then planning my next move. Like, is the wind coming from my right, and then are we going to turn into it or away from it, or that kind of stuff. Like, that's how I keep myself occupied when I'm alone, is that I'm always constantly checking to make sure that like I'm in the right, like the heart rate, I'm not overexerting myself, I'm keeping it all in check. And like you said, like, it's when you're in a group, like when I'm in a group, I always feel like I'm working, it's too easy. It's way too easy for me. And it's because I'm usually the front of a group just because of my size and my abilities is, I find myself on the front of a group more often than I find myself in the back of a group.
Yeah.
So,
one of the things I like to do too is on the especially like right now, we're having to do a lot of indoor riding. Let me back up for a second. When we were able to be outside, you and I both done this where, timing didn't work out and we had to go do our long ride on our own. And so we've gone out and done 6, 7, 8 hour rides by ourselves. And so we kind of you only have to do one of those to really understand, like, okay, what do I have to do to get myself through that? You don't have to do it very many times. Usually once or twice is enough, like in a season. Like right now though, since we're training primarily inside, I get bored really easily inside. Like at least outside, I can kind of look around a little bit. Like even though
me singing you songs, telling you stories, asking you weird questions.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just a dark mental void whenever you talk to me outside. But like when you're out there, like you can, even though you're putting out a tempo effort or whatever, I still kind of look around a little, or I'm at least scoping out the road in front of me. I'm always kind of actively engaged in what's happening. When you're inside on the trainer and you're doing a 3-hour effort or 4-hour effort, like I get bored easily. Like there aren't a lot of TV shows that I can watch that hold my interest while I'm on a bike for that long. So I tend to like whatever's on, like I'll have something on, but I just tend to tune it out. And then to your point, I kind of put myself in a space of like, okay, what's my power? I look down at like Trainer Road or whatever, or I look at Zwift or whatever I've got. I'm like, what's my power? Is there some other distraction I can come up with? But I think what you said about rotating through that checklist is an important thing to do inside as well. Like, hey, what's my power? What's my heart rate? I can focus on my pedal stroke, especially being inside. I don't have to worry about falling over, I hope. But I can, think about full 360 of the pedal stroke, little things like that, how can I be more efficient? So it's a really good time in this phase, like especially as you're stretching out those indoor rides. It's a really good time to like think about, okay, how am I going to get myself through these long efforts with nobody else around? Try a couple of rides without headphones. Like it's okay, maybe have the TV on or something, but don't have headphones in where you're just, headbanging to music, because you won't have that on race day, So I know you do.
Could. Yeah.
You could. I guess you could.
So, yeah.
But
no, if it's like an hour, 90 minutes, I can just sit there and just ride. I don't like, I can just stare at the brick wall, like whatever. I don't care. If it's like 2 hours or if it's a run, it's headphones all the way. Yeah. And I just jam out to music. I don't, the jamming out to the music just makes the time go by faster, and I don't have to focus on like the pain of it, I guess.
Yeah. So. It's all good, but no, I think there's a lot to work out when you're in the build phase. And
if you find yourself, if you're going to be alone in a race, like if you're on an Ironman or whatever, like, you're going to be out there by yourself riding. So like you probably should be factoring that into your build of your alone time. Yeah. That should be
the good thing though about Ironman is there's so many people out there. You're not alone for very long. And it's usually a loop course, so you get the chance to at least see people passing the opposite direction or whatever. But these gravel events where you're truly out in the middle of nowhere by yourself, I mean, I hope you embrace the beauty of that, because that's about all you're going to have to get by on. So, but that's good stuff, man. So I think hopefully it's given a few ideas around what the build block looks like, and give people some things to think about. Because I mean, if you're not in your build, you're going to be in your build here pretty soon for these early season races. So it's right around the corner. It's crazy. It's cold outside now. We look out and there's freaking snow on the ground all over the place.
Yep, but that snow will soonly melt.
Yeah,
and then it'll come back, and then it'll melt again.
Yeah,
and then it'll rain, and then it may snow again, and then
it'll get windy,
and then the wind will come, and then we'll be into spring.
Right. That's right. And then 2 weeks later, it'll be hot.
Yep. And then 2 weeks later, summer.
Yeah.
100 degrees, no wind, 100% humidity.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Bugs everywhere.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Yes. Can't wait. Sweatiness. Ugh. Yeah. No. All right. Well, hopefully this helped out everybody. And, that's all I got. If you guys made it this far, please leave a like, favorite, subscribe. Little comment helps us out huge, really gets us out to other people and stuff like that, and like-minded SufferSooner squad mates. So big things coming in 2025. So
can't wait.
This is just the tip.
Yep.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode. Please, if you like what we are doing here, leave a like, rate us, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. It really helps us grow and finds us more SufferSooner squad mates. And remember, when the finish line feels impossibly far away, we don't give up, we push harder, we dig deeper, and we find solace in the knowledge that our suffering is temporary and our resilience is forever.